when I landed in Paris for a 2-year art research stint in 1996, stereotypes of the French as elegantly debauched and a little unhealthy were given substance. Billboards publicized Perrier water with a moist, shiny woman, naked but for a Perrier bottle cap seated on each nipple. Phone sex vendors advertised in taxi stands and subways. Smoking was still chic. Once, after I donated blood, the attending physician invited me for a cigarette in the courtyard. He asked spectacularly vivid questions about my sexual history, while a nurse in a form-fitting white pantsuit smiled and took notes. Everything in France seemed unabashed, loose, free. Everything, that is, except the libraries. While sexually liberated and defiant in the face of lung cancer, the French were pretty tightly wound when it came to call numbers, cataloging, and the hundreds of words for what, in the US, is simply called a book. The archives and libraries of Paris house imprimés and dossiers and folios and manuscrits, all of which are a document, spelled like document in English, but if you pronounce the terminal T, no one understands. Archival research techniques and all this new vocabulary positioned me as the lost foreigner, acquiring archive lingo in what I hoped desperately to convince people was my mother tongue. It is easy enough to search Flaubert in the library catalog and walk away with Madame Bovary under your arm. But finding a postcard Flaubert sent to his sister Caroline while writing Madame Bovary, its existence suggested via a letter from Caroline to her friend Sophie, cited in a biography by a scholar whose patience with the archive far precedes your own, this entails blind rummaging through a morass of scrawl-covered scraps, stored in boxes labeled only with long, hyper-punctuated alphanumeric codes. At first, I dreamily caressed the paper inscribed with quill pens whose tips had likely been sucked by my art historical heroes. But romance soon gave way to despair, as actually knowing in which chaotic scrapbox to start any given search seemed impossible. I applied often to the librarians who, seated high above the reading room, knew there was a magnificent system of order behind France's National Archives and that it must be respected. The acme of order at the National Archives was the catalog room, where insiders and old-timers masterfully unearthed the long codes required to request boxes from storage. The cavernous room was lined with many, many shelves, which supported many more volumes embossed on the spines with numerical series, but no words. You open the books to find lists like this. 3746, painting commissions during the July monarchy. 3747, ladies' fashions, buggies. 3749, the lice epidemic of Calais. It didn't matter that there was no 3748, which would not have cleared things up. Defeated by these inventories of historical odds and ends, convinced I would never actually write my dissertation, I gave up for a month and explored Parisian debauchery instead of doing my research. Even France's famed sensual pleasures, wine, perfume, lingerie, brothels, are systematized by long-winded, ceremonious regulations that provided deep perspective on the alphanumeric codes. Indeed, there was a magnificent system of order behind France's National Archives. I just needed a stronger dose of Frenchness before I was able to understand it. I even learned to like it. But upon my repatriation at JFK, my American bibliophilic romance was instantly refreshed. Soon, I would be walking down the aisles of the Columbia and CUNY libraries, hand in hand with Library of Congress call numbers, and confident in one of the bedrocks of our relationship. The art books, through thick and thin, would always be in the stacks labeled N through NX. This sober, practical, and very un-French approach to classification was native, comforting to me. Yet, I will return to France over and over, at least until I find Flaubert's postcard.